Greetings, this is Griff Ruby with part 25 on my series, Ecclesiology for Sedevacantists, based on Dogmatic Theology, Volume 2, Christ Church by Msgr G. Van Noort. Continuing where we left off, further proofs of the monarchical structure of the Church and Peter's authority. Proposition 2. It was Christ's will that the primacy, begun with St. Peter, should continue forever. It is true that the primacy can be called in a certain sense the personal prerogative of St. Peter, since it was conferred on him alone rather than on the other apostles. But it is not a personal prerogative in the sense that when Peter died, it died with him. It is a permanent office which must, in accordance with Christ's will, go on forever, as long as the Church itself continues to exist. This thesis is a dogma of the faith. The Vatican Council declared, if anyone says that it is not by the institution of Christ the Lord himself, or of divine right, that St. Peter has an everlasting line of successors in the primacy over the universal church, let him be anathema. Now, of course, as we know, that he continues on is not a proof that there would always be a pope, because even a Sedevacanti period of even 1 second would have been proof, would have disproved that. It means that there is an office. That office is always there, and it is always supposed to be occupied, even though there would be times, usually fairly brief, that it would be empty. Now we're in such a time that has been rather lengthy, and we've seen the effects of that too. But let's see the proof of this, and I think as we prove it and explore it, we're not claiming that the office of the papacy is occupied every second of the Church's existence. We're proving that the office itself endures, and to each person who is elected into that office, they receive the prerogatives of Peter with regard jurisdiction over the whole Church. Proof. From the nature and purpose of the primacy, assuming as proven the Church's indestructibility. Primacy, by its very nature, is a permanent or ordinary office, for it is connected not with the establishment of the Church, but with its conservation and government. Besides, it is intimately bound up with the very constitution of the Church, and this constitution was certainly not to be changed once the apostles had died. So, come up with a contradictory constitution that defines such roles. That is speaking a new organization into existence. So that's what Lumen Gentium did. It was a constitution that contradicted the existing one, and in so doing, did create something new, and with no apostolic continuity. Continuing, the purpose of primacy, as can easily be proved by the words of our Lord in Matthew 16, is to secure and preserve the Church's unity. But this purpose must always be pursued. After the apostolic age, its realization is harder, because the charisms have ceased and the Church is more widespread. The conclusion is evident. From the words of Christ, the whole question can be summed up as follows. When Christ promised and conferred the primacy, did he address his words to Peter as to an individual who was soon to die, or to that same Peter as to a man who was to go on living in an unending line of successors? Not the former, but the latter alternative is definitely the one to be maintained. A. The words of promise. Peter is to do for the Church what a foundation does for a house. But the foundation supports a house not only when it is first built, but continuously, as long as the house lasts. In like manner, Peter is to support the Church by his authority as long as the latter shall last. But Peter, as a physical person, cannot do this. So he must do it as a juridical person living on in his successors. Again, by his authority, Peter is to make the indestructibility of the Church a reality. For the words, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, are joined in a conjugal relationship with the preceding words. But it is impossible for anyone to make a society indestructible simply through the influence of his rule, unless he unceasingly exercises that influence. B. The words of bestowal. Peter is charged with the duty of feeding Christ's lambs and sheep. And this means all his lambs and sheep. See? All. Not just the ones, in a certain group or organization or something, and others can be fed elsewhere, and that's all fine, and they can be saved by that. See? Peter has to be responsible for all of that. Or he's just, by definition, not Peter. It's that simple. But the faithful and the bishops of succeeding generations certainly belong to the flock of Christ just as truly as those who were living at the time of the apostles. And so Peter is to feed them too, by living on in his successors. 3. The testimony of the ancients corroborates this conclusion. They say, for example, A, that Peter lives, rules, and teaches in the person of his successors. Thus wrote Philip, a priest and delegate of the See of Rome at the Council of Ephesus, referring to Peter as he who lives and exercises judicial power to the present day and forevermore in the person of his successors. Wow, what could be more explicit than that? B, they affirm that they have received the power of the keys in or through Peter. By speaking thus, they indicate that the primacy was given to Peter not as a private person, but as a public person, to serve the interests of the church and to remain in the church as long as the latter lasts. Tertullian writes, remember that on this occasion the Lord left his keys, the kingdom of heaven, to Peter, and through Peter to the church. They attest, see, that Peter's primacy continues on in the Bishop of Rome, St. Peter Chrysologus. Whatever the question may be, we urge you to give obedient heed to the writings of the most holy Pope of the city of Rome, for St. Peter, who lives on and governs in his own see, offers the truth of faith to all who seek it. Proposition 3. Peter's primacy lives on in the Roman Pontiff. The object of this proposition is to determine precisely where the primacy, once conferred on Peter with a view to its perpetual continuance, is now factually preserved. Strictly speaking, the primacy could have been preserved without being tied to an episcopal see, in such a way, for example, that the whole business of selecting a successor in the primacy, each time that this should prove necessary, would be the task of the whole episcopal college. But such a procedure, aside from the fact that it would be quite awkward, is in fact not followed. As matters actually stand, the primacy is connected with a particular see, that of Rome, so that whoever is legitimately elected Bishop of Rome receives by that very fact primacy over the universal church. It will be indicated later by what right this bond was effected and whether it could ever possibly be undone. The present proposition has often been defined by the Church's infallible teaching authority. For example, the Vatican Council asserted, if anyone says that the Roman Pontiff is not St. Peter's successor in the same primacy as was his, let him be anathema. I think we'll end on this note. Thank you.